you?
Hi, Dania. I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me. How are you doing?
Missing classes? Do you miss uni, or are you finding work
Yes, I do
better?
actually. I really enjoy learning in the university environment. Um, but yes, at some point you have to get a job and enter that world. But yeah, I do miss it.
Good. And how are you finding the work life, the job? You are assistant risk manager now. How are you finding it?
Yes. Yeah, I'm really, really enjoying it. Yeah, so I'm working on large infrastructure projects, learning loads of great exposure. So yeah, it's brilliant.
Good. Claudia, can you please tell us a little bit about your dissertation?
Yeah, so my dissertation was all about how project managers use communication when undertaking risk management activities and how it can create value, not just for the project, but for the business as a whole. Yeah.
And what did you find, your key finding?
So my key findings were that communication is predominantly interpersonal. So it's with other stakeholders rather than written reports, which was interesting to find because it's predominantly all about meetings and stakeholder engagement rather than analysis behind the scenes, which was quite interesting. And I also found that much more emphasis was placed on reducing threats rather than enhancing opportunities, which was quite surprising because you would think that that's where a lot of the value would come from, enhancing opportunities.
Interesting. So, what inspired you to do this topic?
So I was inspired by the risk management for complex projects module. I did the module because I was quite scared of risk. I didn't fully understand what it was. I thought it was all going to be risk assessments and health and safety and that kind of thing. But then you learn that it's all about project risk and it's much more broad than that. And you learn about systems thinking and also the psychology behind it. And I really just fell in love with it. I think the way of thinking is quite in line with me and how my brain works. I'd say it's quite logical for me. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. And then that inspired me to pick the topic.
Oh, brilliant. Are you finding any of the learning you accumulated by doing your dissertation on the topic of risk? Have you found it useful for your current job as an assistant risk manager, or is the practical world completely different?
No, it's really similar actually. Especially when I was doing my training the first few weeks, I was kept saying, "Oh, this
Mm,
popped up in my dissertation." Yeah, there's definitely a lot that aligns with it. The meetings and the development with the stakeholders and workshop facilitation, that's a massive part of the role. So yeah, I feel like the dissertation really put me in good stead for the role and what I was to expect. So yeah, it worked out really well.
So we can say that what motivated you the most to select this topic was your preference, your personal preference to a specific topic. You didn't have in mind before that I want to pursue a career in risk management per se, but you found that you love that topic and it corresponds with you at some level, and this is what motivated you, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I don't think I thought I was going to end up with this career initially. But yeah, I just went with what I was interested in, which I think is really, really important to do. It's the right way to pick a topic. It's something that you're interested in because that passion's going to carry you through and motivate you when it is hard to write and when when you're struggling, the fact that you're interested in a topic, that's going to really, really help. So yeah, definitely.
I agree. So what was the most challenging part?
So the most challenging part for me was learning about the construction industry. So I didn't know much about it before, and I didn't necessarily have a direct link to it. So that was quite challenging, but I definitely overcame it just through my interviews and speaking to people and doing research. I would also say the other part that I found quite challenging was the bit where you've collected all your data and you're analyzing, because especially when you do qualitative, you don't quite know what you're going to discover, because that's the nature of that methodology. So it was quite hard to put all those thoughts together and pick out the themes and create the framework that I did. So that bit was quite challenging. But yeah, once I got through that, it was plain sailing really through the finish line. But I'm just glad I gave myself enough time, because I'd say I probably had around 2 months after my data collection to do all of my analysis and my conclusions, which I definitely needed.
That's a good point. I wanted to ask you, probably this is very important to other students embarking on the research journey very soon. Did you have a plan, and did you stick to it, or did you have some delay and slippages in that plan in terms of your research?
Yes, I did have a plan. I'd like to think I'm quite an organized person. I did actually stick to the plan. I think the key thing that you need to do is plan your interviews or your questionnaires or whatever methodology you're using, and really think about how you're going to access those. Is it people you already know? Is it your network? Is it LinkedIn? How are you going to reach out to those people? Because that's the part of the dissertation where you're relying on other people. So if you can get that all booked in and organized, then yeah, the rest of it's down to you. So yes, having a plan is so important, and it'll really help you.
Good. This is what we want to learn in project management, right? To be organized, to have some plan, to manage this plan, to manage the risks. So Claudia, did you find any surprising or shocking findings from your analysis? You said the nature of the qualitative methodology allows you to incorporate, it's an inductive approach to incorporate emerging themes. So any emerging surprising findings?
I think another finding on my dissertation was the effects of COVID that it had on the industry. I think it was surprising to find out how it had actually helped the industry, because there was a lot more meetings happening, and also a lot more shorter meetings, whereas before you might have had to take a whole day out to do a risk workshop. Stakeholders may have not wanted to commit that much time to it, whereas now you can have smaller and more frequent meetings. So it has made things more efficient, even though some people, of course, will always miss the face-to-face interaction. That was quite an interesting finding, and how they're taking that forward would be quite an interesting another piece of research to add on to it. And also just the lack of engagement from some stakeholders. Some stakeholders don't see the benefits of risk management. They don't believe in it. So when you're dealing with those sorts of stakeholders, it's quite hard to get them to engage in the process. So that was interesting to me, because as someone who had learnt about it in the module, I kind of assumed that everyone would see the value in it, because I have, but that isn't always the case. So yeah, that was another interesting finding.
I think people during COVID, the majority of them worked virtually online. And you said this this had a positive impact on the way risk chats or conversation took place, because now you don't need to wait for everybody to come to a specific physical place, and they can just have shorter meetings online. Do you think, like from your experience now, how does it work in terms of virtual meetings and virtual teams? Are you still having these kind of virtual kind of teams, or is everybody back to normal? And is this removing this advantage in terms of risk communication?
Yeah, so that's exactly what I'm finding. My team personally, we are all spread across the country. It's a virtual team, and the client that I'm working with as well, they are virtual as well. So yeah, it's basically been exactly like that. I know some people do miss the face-to-face, and I know that sometimes those ad hoc sort of coffee printed style conversations don't happen where you can get information from. And it can be hard to build rapport with people as well. Obviously, trying to build rapport with my new colleagues, and also with the client and the client's team can be difficult over Teams. So I think there's definitely positives and negatives. I quite like some opportunity to go to client offices or go to site to see things. I think that would be really, really beneficial for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I think the future is going to be hybrid way of working where whatever could be done virtually, you can do it. Whatever needs you to meet people, it should happen. You should be able to meet people, especially when you are creating this trust and this relationship at the beginning within the team. So yeah, I agree with you. There are certain parts that require this face-to-face interaction. Now, as a student, if you go back a little bit and think and reflect about your experience, if you have to give other students 3 pieces of advice on how to deliver an excellent dissertation, what would these points be?
Sure. So sort of touched on it earlier, but start early, which I'm sure everyone says, but it is true. But I would add on to that, just don't be scared, because I think the reason people don't start early is because they're scared or they don't quite know how to approach it. So just try not to be scared. Do start with perhaps a mind map or a list of ideas of things that you are interested in or avenues you might want to explore. Maybe have a chat with a few tutors or people in your network that might be able to help develop the ideas slightly and help you pick the best one. And don't be scared to engage with people as well, especially if you are wanting to do interviews. Don't be scared to message people on LinkedIn or do a post, because from my experience, people are generally really happy to help people wanting to come into the industry and students, because at the end of the day, we're the future of their industry. So they quite like that. So don't be scared, definitely. Number 2 would be use your tutor. They are there to help you, but ultimately you need to manage that relationship. So you need to reach out to them and you need to be proactive, but they really are there to help you. And if you do start early and you are organized, then you can send them your work and you can get feedback, which for me was so helpful. So yeah, but you need to do that early if you want that. So that's another one. And yeah, number 3 would be something that we have spoken about as well, but choose a topic that you are interested in, because you never know where it could lead. So in my case, I was connecting with people on LinkedIn about potential interviews, and that's actually how I ended up speaking to someone about the job that I'm in now. So if I hadn't have picked this topic, if it was a topic that I wasn't necessarily interested in and someone had asked me about a job, then maybe I wouldn't have taken it or I wouldn't have wanted to take it. So it really did open doors for me, which was absolutely amazing.
That's brilliant. It's really, really nice to hear about your experience, Claudia, and I'm really happy for you that you managed to finish something that you were interested in successfully in an excellent way, and you also managed to get a job in an area that you are actually also interested in. So I like what you said about that you are the future of the industry. You are the future of the industry, really. And I hope that all graduates are looking at it from your perspective, looking at this journey of research as well, because some do think that this is more of an academic exercise as opposed to, more to the practitioner world, but it is very helpful. And I think what you found in your research could be applicable in the future, maybe with some extra research could be applicable to the industry, and you can immediately take some points from what you found and apply it. So any final comments, final thoughts you would like to share with us?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I definitely agree with what you just said. It's not an academic exercise. It's definitely something that you bring in. And yeah, I've been thinking about it a lot and ways to develop the research. And actually, my new company have been quite supportive. Like they've wanted to read it and they've wanted to carry through my ideas into the team, and that's lovely as well. And yeah, if anyone wants to reach out to me, anyone who's interested in risk, wants some help or advice or interviews, then please feel free to get in touch because I'll be more than happy to help.
Brilliant. We will add your email and contact address to the note below the video. Thank you very much, Claudia, and have a nice weekend. Enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you for joining.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye.
Hi, Anna. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome. Thank you for participating in this. How's life now that you finished finally? It took you 2 years, right, as a part-timer?
Yes, 2 years. I do feel like I have a lot of time, but I must confess that after finishing the studies, the first few weekends, I just spent them doing nothing, just enjoying the possibility that I could do anything, but not actually starting in something else.
I completely understand. The pleasure of doing nothing. I think Italians have got a saying for that. So yeah, well done, and also you've got very high marks on all your modules. So well done on that as well.
Thank you.
And now we are going to talk about your dissertation in specific. So can you tell us, please, a little bit more about your topic? So what did you do? What did you find briefly?
Well, for me, it was quite easy to decide on the area that I would research because it's my area of expertise and what I do in my work. But I wanted to take a closer look into project management software. And initially, it started as my own curiosity to see whether other project professionals share the same experiences. In terms of the findings, it was quite, luckily that I managed to get the full spectrum of age groups and people with different experiences. And the answers that I received to the questions were also covering the full spectrum, which made it a bit frustrating at first because there weren't some striking results. But I believe that also reflects how projects are unique and have their specificities, even if they're in the same industry, whether it's rail or utilities. And I did have as the most reflected industries rail and underground. It was mostly medium to large projects that is in value, and most of the respondents have been project controls professionals or project managers.
Oh, excellent. How many responses have you got on your?
My target was 100, and I managed to get 107.
Oh, perfect. And your title is evaluating the use of project management software. So what did you find? Do project managers use very sophisticated software, the majority of them, or do they rely on, sometimes I know they rely on Excel, or simple software? Are they comfortable with these sophisticated ones, or what did you find?
Well, as expected, Excel plays a very big role. It appeared as one of the key softwares used for planning and scheduling, risk and cost management. However, most of the respondents have indicated that they use more than one or even sometimes 3 or 4 software at the same time. So whereas Excel was present in all of the responses, there were also more construction and infrastructure project management software that have been highly used as well.
So as a practitioner yourself, do you use these software on daily
Yes.
basis?
Yeah. Yes, I use them daily.
Which one do you use the most?
Well, it depends on the project, but the most popular ones for planning and scheduling would be Primavera P6, Asta Power projects, and Microsoft projects that's mostly used for the smaller contractors.
Okay. I believe you are working, if it's infrastructure, you are mostly working with medium to large projects, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And how did you get trained on Primavera?
Well, it started through my the consultancy that I work for. I joined them as a graduate freshly after I finished my degree, and I was lucky to get a very comprehensive training program in all that is project management, project controls, and all the softwares.
Oh, brilliant. What was your first degree in, Anna?
Law.
Okay. Okay. So,
Yeah.
and you managed to make the shift from law to construction. Was it okay? Was it challenging at the first?
Well, even though I studied law, I actually like to think that I'm more of a technical person and more into mathematics than what is essay writing and argumentation. Um, and while I was in university, I did have some work experience in projects. So it was work experience in the legal department, but involved with infrastructure projects. And that's when I realized this would be something I would love to do.
Brilliant. You are actually an inspiration to many who study something that is probably not pure management or business, and then they find themselves in a career and they successfully, actually, they become very successful in a career in project management, planning,
Yes,
scheduling, and all that.
and my legal studies have actually helped me a lot because working in project controls, especially on larger projects, there are a lot of reporting requirements and targets that need to be met. So it has helped me a lot in understanding what we needed to deliver.
Perfect. Okay, now back to the dissertation and the way you delivered it. So I can see that you said that you come across this problem while working. So you were actually motivated because you wanted to understand what's happening, and you were speaking to project managers all the time. But what was the most challenging part of the dissertation as a student?
Well, the first challenge that I found was to narrow down the scope. Being so excited about the topic, I wanted to discuss everything and anything that has to do with project management software. I was taking it as far as also looking into artificial intelligence, but I also wanted to specifically analyze how each project management software is used. It was a very, very big topic. And then starting to do more research and the literature review, I somehow managed to narrow it down to the key things that I wanted to look into. And to flow from that, the second challenge was to figure out when to stop with the literature review. You always think that you don't know enough and that maybe the best research is still yet to be found. So that was a bit challenging for me to move on from the pure literature review and research and actually put into practice and start with my own research based on the primary data that I had obtained.
I think that's brilliant, Anna. You've highlighted the most challenging bits for all students. And I noticed this, that most students come at the beginning, they are very ambitious and they want to accomplish a lot. And it's challenging for them to scope it at the very early stages of the research. And this is what we try to tell students all the time. Please try to narrow down what you are trying to do, because you've got only little time to do it, and it has to be manageable, it has to be doable. So the first challenge that you overcome was by reading more. So because you didn't know where to start, or maybe you didn't know what the scope is, you narrowed it down by reading more from the literature. The second challenge you mentioned, which is when to stop reading. How did you manage that? Did you allocate yourself like a milestone by that date I'm going to stop literature review, or were you looking at some key authors that you thought if I read these articles, that's fine? How did you manage it?
I think that it was in terms of setting myself a clear deadline just to make sure I had enough time to do thoroughly all of the other parts. And something that would also be a top tip for other students was that whenever I had a meeting with my supervisor, and we used to have at least one meeting per month, we would set some clear targets for the following meeting, and that actually helped me a lot to not postpone and feel like I can actually carry on with the literature for one more month. But having those deadline in place and the meeting with the supervisor to actually hold me accountable in a way definitely helped.
Yeah, and this is a message to students as well who are embarking on this research journey. Use your supervisors. They are there to help you and guide you, and perhaps whenever you feel that you are going all the way, you need to set yourself some boundaries so you can accomplish your objectives. Now, did you find anything shocking that you didn't expect at the beginning of your research? So something out of the analysis of your primary data that you said to myself, wow, I didn't expect this?
Well, I'm not sure if there was something entirely shocking. And as I said, I did, for all of the options that I had for the respondents, I always had answers across the full spectrum and seeing different perceptions. If there was one thing that would stand out was that so I looked at planning and scheduling, cost and risk management software. And it was interesting to see that in terms of risk management software, around a quarter of the respondents did not know what software would be used for risk. And that would be, it would be interesting to explore this further, or to see what would be the reasons of why even project managers are not sure what's being used for risk management, or whether it's just because of the respondents that I had volunteers to fill in, whether it was just those respondents that I found which didn't know, or if it actually applies across the industry.
Interesting. I think risk management in specific is project managers have different views. Sometimes they underestimate the value of risk management. So some organizations won't invest in sophisticated software per se. But no, I think what I meant by shocking, maybe the percentage. I know you did a questionnaire, so you have limited set of options to choose from. But I mean, in terms of the statistics, did you the majority of people, the majority of behavior, was it the same as you expected at the beginning? Was it in line with the literature, or was it different from the literature?
Well, one thing that was maybe a bit strange was that all of the respondents agreed that there should be done more towards implementing better or more project management software, and that organizations should actively seek for this kind of opportunities. However, I did have around 20% of the respondents who said that the use of project management software either has no impact or has a bad impact on the project management efficiency. So that seemed a bit to contradict, and I think more research would be needed to understand whether people think that in general about project management software, or whether just specifically on their project it hasn't been used effectively.
That's very interesting. I had the same. I had the same experience in the past when I was working in the industry. I found that there was resistance, generic resistance against using or implementing a new software, although they might believe in its value. But there's this resistance by the team or the employees that, oh, this is something new. This is changing what we used to do before. So I can understand where this is coming if they were about it's a hustle, but not believing in the value. This is something else. As you said, it might need some more digging down, because we are moving into this digital age. We are talking about AI, and I think especially when you are managing big projects, you need the help of sometimes sophisticated software.
Yes, I'm actually glad you mentioned the resistance, because one of the highlights, I also looked at what the professionals consider as the most critical impediments to, first of all, adoption of project management software, but then also more effective use. And it was interesting to see that the most critical ones were more related to the organization and the people working on projects than the actual software functionalities. So the top one was the resistance to change and the lack of training.
Yeah. I would expect that. And our last question is for you to really summarize your advice to students in 3 points. So what would these top 3 pieces of advice to students who will be doing their research next year?
Well, the first and the most important, and I know they'll probably hear this a lot and not believe it, is to start as soon as possible, because even though there is a long period of time, there are quite a few months. However, the time itself, the hours that they would be able to allocate, given that some of them might have work as I did, or other personal responsibilities and other modules, that actually doesn't leave it to a lot of time. Another top tip which I found very useful was speaking with people about my topic, and not just the supervisor. I mean, just getting a friend. And I know I did this with my family and quite a lot of friends. They had no idea what I was talking about, and they couldn't actually give their advice in terms of the topic or the content. But speaking out loud, it helped me create the links and have a better logic and find the flow of my argument and set the structure. Because as I said, when I started, I wanted to cover all sorts of ideas and they were very disconnected. So that's the second one. And I think that the third one, which I already mentioned, was for each meeting with the supervisor, setting targets for the next one. That would really help you keep focus and stay on track.
Yeah, definitely. You are a student of project management. You are a student of project management, and our students actually are studying project management. So why not implement these skills in managing your dissertation? It would be great. You should have a timeline, a plan, a schedule, and you should have milestones. And this is actually a project, a research project that should be managed effectively and in the right way to successfully finish on time and to deliver something of quality. Anna, thank you very much. It was a pleasure having you with us, and all the best in your career. I'm sure you are doing great, and you'll be doing even greater in the future. Thank you very much, Hannah, for joining, and have a nice day.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Take care.
Have a good day.
Hello, Andrew. How are you?
Hi, Dania. I'm good. How are you?
I'm okay. Thank you for joining us. Let's
No
get
worries.
straight to it. Sustainability is now a keyword in all project management talks, whether professionally or academically. So, can you please tell us a little bit about your dissertation and what was your main research question?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, sustainability is, pretty massive at the moment. Obviously, we've got COP26 going on right now, but sustainability is actually about more than just that. You've got to consider not just the environment, but also, social and economic side of things as well. So, yeah, my research question was, to what extent does sustainable project management performance impact project success in the UK infrastructure construction industry?
Okay, and what was your main finding or the main conclusion?
My main finding was that there was a strong positive relationship between sustainable project management practices and project success. It actually explained 55% of the variance. So, it is a pretty significant finding. But I also considered, I also looked at the individual aspects of sustainable project management. So I found that, of the three, the triple bottom line dimensions, so social, environmental, and economic sustainability, I found that social and followed by the economic dimensions were actually the most impactful on project success, whilst environmental sustainability was surprisingly a lot less impactful.
Oh, okay. You said you found that the performance of sustainable project management is actually linked to project success, and the social and the economic one were more linked with project success. Did you find that these projects were actually applying the principles of sustainable project manager? And in what sense would you say economic and social sustainability? How was this applied in projects? Through what?
Yes, so I mean, what I looked at specifically, so to give you an idea, like I started at the beginning when I first started, considering about what I want to research, I was like, I'm interested in sustainability and I'm interested in infrastructure construction, and I want to see how, these factors impact the success of these projects, basically. But then I kind of had to like narrow that down a little bit and actually look at like, well, how do you actually measure sustainability, So, one aspect that I looked at was sustainability assessment tools. So, for example, in the UK, we've got BREEAM, so BREEAM, and they kind of like, they kind of look at the practices that are used within projects and then kind of like give you a score, and then you can use that to go ahead and, well, eventually it kind of ends up getting used in a way to attract further investment, pretty much. But I kind of decided not to look at that necessarily. I looked at more at the actual practices themselves. So, like how well are, for example, environmental concerns actually managed within projects, or how well are social concerns managed within projects, and same for economic as well.
Okay. Did you focus on any specific stage during the project, or was it just general project management in all phases?
No, yes, so I didn't focus on any specific stage. I thought it was really important actually not to, in a way, just because, there are different kinds of impacts that kind of occur throughout the lifetime of a project. And when these projects are so massive and they go on for so long, the impacts themselves are also really quite significant as well. So I thought it was important to kind of encapsulate all of that.
Brilliant. So, what was your main motivation? What inspired you to select this topic?
Yeah, so like I've already mentioned, sustainability is something that sits quite closely with me. It's a massively growing issue at the moment. It's you know, you can kind of see it everywhere. Everyone's kind of concerned about it. But infrastructure in particular, for me, really, is just, you know, I'm really interested by like big infrastructure projects. So, you know, for example, we've got HS2 and Crossrail as well. So, you know, I was living in London as well. Crossrail was you know, heavily delayed, and you kind of saw in the news all the time. But I still find it really interesting. So, you know, I kind of want to look into that, and also look into, you know, like the kind of impacts that they have, because they do have, especially on society and also environment. In fact, all of them, like even economic issues, like they really have the biggest impacts, really, don't they? Because they, you know, these kind of projects like HS2, they really do affect the whole country. So I thought it was really interesting to kind of look into these kind of projects.
Do you use any of this knowledge that you acquired while working on your dissertation, working on your projects in general? Did you find any of it useful in your current job?
I would say it's difficult to really say that just yet, because I've only been in this current job for a month so far. So I can't really I can't really comment on that just yet. But however, I have noticed, you know, like obviously the business I am in, you know, there is a really strong focus on sustainability, you know, especially environmental sustainability. So, you know, stuff like you know, using hydrogen to provide energy, that's something, you know, that's really a major focus at the moment. So, you know, I'm really kind of proud to be working in that.
Yeah, so hopefully you will find some place to apply these
Yeah.
sustainability principles in your work as a project manager. Andrew, what was the most challenging part of your dissertation?
My most challenging part was definitely choosing and narrowing down my research topic. Yeah, I mean, I remember I had quite a struggle with that actually, just because, you know, I kind of started with something really quite broad, and to be honest, in a way, I kind of ended up with something still fairly broad actually. So I can't say I narrowed it down too far. But yeah, no, I think it was kind of trying to find something that you are really interested in that also hasn't, you know, already been researched to death, where, you know, you still need to find that research gap, and you know, try and make your own contribution to you know, the knowledge around the subject.
Mm. How did you overcome this challenge? Did you finally found a way to narrow it down?
With lots of time and perseverance and struggles, I would say. I think it was actually one of my, yeah, it was one of my major challenges, and it, you know, you know, even after I submitted my proposal, for example, I still hadn't really quite narrowed it down to exactly the point that I wanted to be at. So, you know, what it took really was a lot of reading, to be honest. You know, continue my literature review, really flesh it out. And then, you know, as you kind of write your literature review, it kind of brings you to its own conclusion in a way. You kind of, you know, it kind of narrows down your research topic for you.
It is indeed very important. We keep telling this to students that the more you read, you accumulate the knowledge for sure, but then this is the only way to narrow down your research question. Otherwise, you will struggle eventually in trying to understand what kind of data you are collecting and why you are collecting it. So
Definitely.
I understand that most students find this a challenge. So this is a common reoccurring challenge whenever you speak to students. And especially because you start at the beginning very ambitious and very excited, and you want to do many things perhaps, or you want to achieve or to solve big problems. But it's really about finding this little gap that you are interested in the first place, and then second is doable. Solving it or addressing it, not necessarily finding a solution, but it's the how you address it and how you contribute with some insights is what is important in this MSc dissertations. Okay, so what was your most challenging part? We've covered that. Have you come across any surprising or shocking findings that you did not expect or you did not find in the literature when you were analyzing or after you finished your data analysis?
Yeah, I would say probably wouldn't say shocking necessarily, but it was somewhat surprising because I've really gone through my main findings and I found that there was an impact, but then I kind of looked more closely at whether there are any underlying structures within the data. So I conducted a principal factor analysis actually, and I kind of wanted to see how whether there are any underlying structures and how they actually match up with the constructs that I used. Because my constructs, they're based on, for example, project success. I based it on, what I've found in the literature, for example, whilst the sustainable project management practices, they're really based on the triple bottom line concept. So like I said, the economic, social, and environmental dimensions. And following this analysis, I actually found that especially the economic and social dimensions, they're actually much more deeply intertwined than it would really lead you to believe, whilst the environmental dimension was really quite separate. So this kind of led to me actually essentially rearranging, like redefining the triple bottom line, and ended up with 4 separate dimensions instead. Which are then actually labeled, a socioeconomic dimension, an external social dimension, and an internal social dimension, as well as the environmental dimension, which actually sat separate to everything else. And it's kind of somewhat surprising because social sustainability is, when you're doing your research, you always find that this always singled out as the one that is actually the least researched. But in fact, I found that it was actually the most impactful, and that you can kind of see that in the way that I ended up actually naming these dimensions as well, just because they were so heavily focused on social issues rather than environmental and economic even as well.
Oh, good. So do you think your results or findings are readily applicable? Can you just take them and not necessarily apply them, but can you just take them to the industry and tell them this is what I found? Or do you think more research is needed to fill in some gaps that you found at the end?
I'd say there's obviously definitely more research that's needed. I think what I've found is actually, it's quite easy to see parallels within it already, in action. So for example, with the 3 like social, like economic dimensions that I created, you can kind of already see examples of that. Just a real quick example, for example, the external social dimension, that kind of really addressed like the social issues in like a commercial context. So that's with like, the wider community. And, it kind of like highlights, so not with the wider community, this one is with the with customers and suppliers. So that's like the commercial context within which, these social issues exist. And that really highlights the importance of, having really good customer and supplier relationships. And that's actually not really that surprising, really, is it? Because
Yeah.
obviously, if you have good relations with your customers and your suppliers, that will bring you benefits in the long run. And the same as well with the socioeconomic dimension, which actually kind of looks more at social issues, like in terms of like the local community, and actually bringing an economic benefit to that community as well, and those stakeholders. And you see that already in action as well. So if you look at corporate social responsibility, for example, it's essentially, it is almost like a model that allows businesses to gain a competitive advantage by like strategically including social factors in their very business model, in fact. And that really helps to like increase their reputation, and that's how they gain an advantage. So they do this by providing greater transparency, greater stakeholder engagement, and therefore being more accountable to their stakeholders.
Indeed. Yeah, I agree. Brilliant. So, Andrew, if you have to give other students embarking on the research journey soon 3 pieces of advice, what would these be?
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, definitely start early. Yeah, because for me, I mean, I still struggled with time a lot. And like I mentioned, I had a lot of trouble really narrowing down my research topic. And to be honest, in hindsight, I guess at the time I kind of felt like, oh, I haven't been assigned a supervisor yet necessarily, or like, oh, I don't really need to start doing this just yet. But really, like, you can take your own initiative and actually you can come up with a rough research topic. You can conduct your literature review at any time really, because, it's your own research project. You're not, your supervisor's just there to guide you really. So you can conduct your literature review and really narrow it down before, well before you even submit your proposal. So yeah, definitely start early. Tying into that as well, I would also say, in a way, like I mentioned, your supervisor's there to guide you, but he's not there to do it for you either. So I would probably say, don't expect to rely too much on your supervisor. You've got to do your own research into how to conduct research. So that is, read your textbooks on how the research process really plays out, and then take your own proactive actions to really get the ball rolling there. And my final piece of advice would definitely be, if you can, try and like build your network really early. So do lots of networking. Maybe even consider choosing a topic where you've actually already got a stronger existing network. Where you've got people that you can already, you've already got people available that you could interview or distribute surveys through, for example. Yeah, that would really help.
That's very useful. I agree with you. I think I interviewed other students and they all agree that starting early is key. You don't want to, keep postponing it, because as you said, it's a project, right? And we are studying project management. You are studying project management, so at least the least any student can do is to be able to manage their own research project, to be able to submit successfully on time, and also provide something of quality. And building the network is really very important, and this is why the University of Westminster really provides great opportunities for networking, whether through webinars or online or through the physical events. So I think I agree with you on these three pieces of advice that are very important. I think that's all for me, Andrew, unless you have any other comments you'd like to share with us.
No, I think that's all for me as well.
Yeah,
Thank you for having me.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for joining, and I wish you all the best in your job. I know it's still fresh. How are you finding it so far? Is it?
Yeah, it's great fun actually. Yeah, just getting settled in. Well, I am, I've gotten settled in now. We had quite a long induction week, but we're getting the ball rolling. Luckily offices are starting opening up as well. So, even though it's flexible, like, I can come into the office and actually like meet people face to face, which is makes the world a difference really. I think after a year at home studying, it's quite nice to actually go in somewhere and see other people really. But yeah.
Definitely.
Mm.
So I wish you all the best, and thank you for joining us, and have a nice rest of the day.
Great, thank you. You too.
Thank you.